All right. Hello and welcome to the webinar Beyond Culture Shock, How to Best Prepare Students for Studying Abroad, hosted by Daniel Kerr and Tara Madden-Dent. My name's Nicole and I'll be your producer for the first part of the program to ensure that everyone's logged in and dialed in successfully. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please speak out or send a chat in the lower right-hand corner of your control panel and we'll get you some help. And before we get started, I wanted to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing them into the questions pane of your control panel. And I'll address those, I'll bring them in as we can throughout the session, and we'll also have a Q&A toward the end of today's presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to your facilitator, Dan Kerr.
Okay. So welcome everybody. So I think what I'll do here, I'd like to talk to everybody in person. And Tara, why don't you join me as well? So this is Dan Kerr. Welcome from my home office in Stony Brook, New York. Normally you look out the window and see my backyard. So we're in the midst of a blizzard, which adds a particular type of a homey feel to today's webinar. We would like it to be a conversation. So I think of myself as being kind of snowed in with you all. So I am very grateful for the opportunity to be with you here today. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to represent Aperian Global and work with our clients in the marketplace. I've got a particular interest in this topic. I did spend about 23 years with Deloitte, primarily in the global office, and also have been working as an adjunct at Stony Brook University the last 13 years or so, working with quite a few students from other countries, particularly students from China. I remember when I did my own doctoral work at NYU, we always looked for that elusive, what they used to call the praxis, kind of the optimization between theory and practice. And in that context, I'm very grateful to work with my colleague, Tara Madden-Dent. This is actually the third time she and I have collaborated together on a study. And Tara and I have been working together since she did her doctorate at the University of Reno. And I think in terms of getting the combination of theory and practice, Tara has done it especially well, particularly in this space. She's worked very closely preparing international students for the cultural challenges of studying in the United States, really since going all the way back to 2012. So Tara, would you like to say hello?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Dan, and good morning to everyone that's joining us. I'm excited to be here and be able to share this study and some of the examples and insights. Pre-departure preparation has traditionally been the missing piece in study abroad and international ed programs, and with the help of Aperian Global and our university European counterparts there, like Steps to Success and the Fulbright office, we're able to share some of the best practices and some of the outcomes of early pre-departure preparation. Thanks, Darren.
Oh, great. So Tara and I are now going to turn off our cameras, free up a little bit more space. And let me just talk before I turn it back to Tara for today's agenda. So again, the praxis is the term I like to use in terms of the relationship between theory and practice. So Tara will begin with just some of the, what the research is saying about the challenges of study abroad. Then we will get into the actual study itself. And then we'll talk about the specific validated instruments that we use. We use both GlobeSmart in this and also the International Effectiveness Score. So we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about the other sources of data, and the design that Tara used in terms of this pre-departure training was quite rich in terms of the other sources of data. We'll share with you the findings, and also we'll get into our conclusions and recommendations. We would like to keep this somewhat interactive. So what we're going to do, I've got a number of polling questions, and then if time permits, as was mentioned in the introduction, you have questions you can type in at any time. So we'll pause and see if any questions have come in as well. But first, I'd like to call up the first polling question. And so we'd like to get to know the audience a little bit here. So if we could call up that first poll. So please let us know with regard to your role regarding this topic. Are you a faculty member? Are you an academic administrator? Are you a consultant? Are you a researcher? Or are you an other? And if you're an other, then please use the chat box to tell us which of the others describe to you. So just take a second on that. Okay. And Nicole, you'll let us know when the results are ready.
Yep, I think we can close the poll, and some of the other input we've been receiving so far. Amy's an academic administrator. Darinka is an Education USA advisor. We have a management analyst, editor for an online Go Abroad support service, program coordinator in Education Abroad, nonprofit. A lot of diversity here. So thanks all for your response.
Right, it looks like speaking to a primarily academic audience there. So we've got a combination of faculty members and the academic administrators would be the majority of the group. So thank you for that. We can take that poll down now. So at this stage, I'd like to turn it back to Dr. Madden-Dent to talk about the challenges of study abroad. Tara, over to you.
Excellent, thank you, Dan. I'm glad to be amongst academic and global educational leaders here. Very excited to have this discussion. The first slide we're going to start with is the challenges of study abroad. Speaking to this type of audience, I'm sure that the majority of us are aware that students and scholars face incredible obstacles before, during, and after international assignments. These listed obstacles here are some of the most frequently reported factors contributing to poor academic achievement, declined health and safety, student dropout, transfer or dismissal, and professional underpreparedness. In this study, in the literature, and in my previous research, these contributing challenges can be avoided or minimized if addressed early enough and provided continual support through the Study Abroad or International program. What we found here to address some of the sociocultural, the psychological, the linguistic, the legal, academic, professional, and academic preparation, students who embody and practice social, emotional, cultural, and academic skills often experience increased course completion rates, academic achievement, graduation rates. These students with increased skills and preparation experience less behavioral or discipline issues once they arrive in their new host country. And what I found very interesting is that according to the Center of Benefit Cost Studies in Education at Teachers College, Columbia University, these skills, if students embody them, when embedded within academic learning, have been found to return $11 for every $1 invested. So if we address these challenges, not only are we going to support the student and the overall student experience during their study abroad or international ed program, but we're actually going to be making smarter evidence-based decisions for our organizations to be more effective and operate more efficiently. Go on to the next slide. So some of these quotes here by researchers and industry leaders touch on topic areas around adjustment, adaptation, cultural competence, and social skills that impact academic readiness and global leadership. All of these of which, if incorporated appropriately within international academic programs, can reduce the challenges of study abroad, both for the student and institution. We find that addressing all 8 areas of wellness while preparing students for the academic setting, the professional expectations that they'll have at that institution or organization will mitigate a lot of the financial and the resource and personal challenges that they face.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit, thank you, Tara, in terms of the challenges, recognizing, again, every voice is important here, but recognizing the majority of academics that we have. I'm going to pull up the next polling question. What, from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest cultural challenges for the international students you work with? Is it language? Is it health and safety? Is it classroom and campus adjustment? Is it social isolation? Is it something else? And those of you who represent the other groups on the phone, if you would think of perhaps a client that you work with or an academic institution that you're closest with. So we would like to for you to vote as well, even if you have to, think of one particular school you work with very closely as you answer the questions. So we'll give you a minute for that. So there is other elections going on today, I understand, in Pennsylvania.
Okay, and we can go ahead and share results.
Okay, pretty strong, very strong here. I see the classroom and campus adjustment by far, way up there, 39%, and social isolation. So I have a quick calculation. That looks like 74% are one of the others, followed by language, and then followed by health and safety. Anything there is, I don't want the 4% to feel left out. Anything in the 4% that you noticed that's worth sharing?
Yes,
Nicole?
we have a couple. Sure, yeah. So Patty said something else, academic integrity. Meg says cultural adjustment. Lenny says general social adjustment. And Beck says language issues are really the underpinning of all the others listed here, all of which are major concerns for international students. So thank you all.
Yeah, I've often heard it said that language is the conveyor of culture. Let's take a little pause here, and why don't we, in terms of we've had any questions that have come in from the group so far that we can answer, Nicole.
Sure. We have a question that says, have you done or are you planning similar studies with students from other countries?
So Tara, I'll turn that one over to you. I know that you've written extensively in this area. Tara and I have done a couple of studies together, but Tara, I'll let you take that one.
Sure. And Nicole, I can't see it on my screen. Can you restate the question?
Yes. Have you done or are you planning to do similar studies with students from other countries?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So in 2012, I began my research studying pre-departure academic and cultural preparation with students from Eastern Asian countries, undergraduates. It started with undergraduates. And we studied students from Japan, China, South Korea before they came over, and we compared them and tracked them during their first semester after having a class in their home country. Then later on, we also did a study with undergraduate students from several different countries, primarily Latin America and Europe. And we're also currently doing studies with U.S. students, high school students, before they go study abroad. So yes, this particular study is from Eastern Europe, from Poland, and they're a little bit older, they're the graduate level compared to the undergraduate, so that's a whole different beast. And they're, yes, primarily from Poland. So thank you for the question.
Good. And as I reflect on those, Tara, I think we have good topics for future webinars as well. So,
yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. So at this point, let's now move into the study itself. We'll take some more questions after the study. So I'll move into the study itself. Tara, back to you.
Excellent, thank you, Dan. So this study was guided by its research question, Again, how does culture and academic preparation influence or impact first semester experiences? And this was targeted towards the Polish Fulbright scholars before they came to the U.S. for the 2017 fall semester. So we had about 14 participants, all Polish Fulbright scholars, and they had the aim of completing graduate studies or conducting research or teaching at one of 11 hosting U.S. universities last semester. They either came alone or brought their family, and their ages ranged about 23 to 41. The majority of the participants were 23 to about 30. We had a control group and a treatment group. The control group received the traditional support through the Fulbright's one-day pre-departure orientation, and the treatment group also received that, but in addition to that traditional standard one-day orientation, we implemented a pre-departure cultural and academic class, this intervention. It was a 4-week course that began with a one-day, full-day orientation training workshop. Then we had a 4-week online cultural and academic preparation class taught by a U.S. professor that included online one-on-one office hours. And then we concluded with a follow-up conclusion workshop and training, all-day training, to kind of bring it full circle before students departed Poland and came to the U.S. The learning objectives within this pre-departure cultural and academic preparation class were to examine the individual culture of the participant and how their culture was similar and different to the host country. In this case, it was the U.S. culture. How our communication styles differed, how our interaction styles differed, our thinking styles. It was heavily based on social, emotional, cultural, and academic skill preparation. We investigated U.S. academic and legal systems. We used, in addition to our professors' videos and lessons, we used a series of videos designed by Student Success on Title IX. So we went over student safety, harassment, dating, consent, specific legal differences between our countries, so that the students could develop realistic expectations of what they were going to be held responsible for during their first semester to help with integration and adjustment. After learning the content, the last learning objective was to create individualized action plans, goal setting, and strategic steps in order to achieve their personal, academic, professional goals in the U.S. So the instructional methods of this study, of this course that our university provides, includes 20 homework assignments. Again, we conduct the course through our online learning management system, Canvas, which is a very popular management system by U.S. universities. The course also included 20 quizzes. We had multiple one-on-one office hours between the Fulbright Scholar participant and the U.S. professor. This was to practice English, to discuss culture as we were practicing language skills, to go over their roles that they would be responsible for in the U.S. to achieve their goals. The lessons, the actual 20 homework lessons, included a series of instructional approaches that were diverse for different learning styles, including videos and podcasts, reading, PowerPoint. We did incorporate assessments to gauge their cultural profiles and cultural competencies. And then we had worksheets and written work for their action planning, and really the reflection of their experience going through the 4-week class. And as I mentioned before, we began and we concluded the class with in-person workshops so that the students in the class could be together and connect and build that network, and to make the theoretical applied in the practical setting.
Great, thanks, Tara. Now it's interesting. Tara has outlined the study, talked about the program. Interested in terms of the group here, in terms of, again, those of you who come from one particular institution, answer from that point of view. Those of you who represent different groups, think of the school you probably work with most closely. And we're interested in learning about what your university school may or may not be doing with regard to pre-departure training, and the results are anonymous here. So if we could pull up that poll. So does your school offer a pre-departure cultural training for your international students? And please answer honestly, and notice not sure is a perfectly acceptable answer. So we'll give you a minute to vote here, and Nicole, we will have time for a question or two after this as well, if you want to be scanning the chat.
Great, we have a few that have come in.
Great.
While we're waiting, one quick question I think Tara can answer. Amy asks, how many credits, if any, does the course carry?
That's a great question, Amy, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit more in depth in the recommendations section, but the short answer to your question is my university offers 3 regionally accredited credits on a U.S. transcript record.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's take a look at the results here. Currently offer, so under 50%. So that's great to hear that there are universities making the investment in that. And then we jump ahead to not sure, but I think we should. And then we've got they're not sure, and we've got not yet, but we're considering. So looks like about 50% of you are doing something, and the others, other than that 1%. So we do respect the point of view of the 1% think it's not needed. We respect that. It looks like we got 99% thinking that pre-departure training is something worth investing in. So thank you for that. We can pull that poll down now. Another question?
Yeah, Lenny asked which cultural assessment instruments did you use, and I know you're going to cover that next.
Yeah, but you never want to make anybody wait. So what we did 2 assessments, which actually takes us right into the next section, but out of respect, I'm going to answer it right now. So we use the GlobeSmart Cultural Profile, which would give it's a neutral reflection of their cultural orientation. So we use that. And then what we did is we actually used the IES, which is a measure of intercultural effectiveness. And as Tara will actually share with you the results, what we did is we did a pre, and we did a post. So we assessed their cultural competency before the intervention, and we assessed it after the intervention to see if any progress had been made. And we'll share that with you in a moment. So great question. Got another one?
Which instruments did students prefer or get the most out of in this study?
I got to turn that one over to Tara. She was there. Tara?
The findings and the student expressions demonstrated there were different preferences for different reasons. The instruments, I guess, defined by our interventions for teaching and then measuring their growth or experience kind of were aimed at different things. So the GSP, or the Globe Smart profile, was definitely a favorite because that is where students got to study themselves and have discussion and reflection about their own cultural orientations and their preferences. That was a favorite by many. The IES allowed them to analyze the kind of growth that they experienced from the course, what they gained and benefited, and where they stretched before their study abroad experience. The other instruments that were used in the class, like some of the one-on-one discussions and questions during the office hours, students really preferred working with a U.S. professor to practice their English skills and to reflect on questions about U.S. culture that they had never considered before, to relieve a lot of their concerns and anxiety and just kind of that uncertainty before the study abroad. So I'll get into it a little bit further as we go through the final slides, but that's a good question. Thank you for asking.
Okay, we can do one more, Nicole, if you have a good one. Otherwise, I'll get into the next bit.
Let's go ahead and move on into the next section.
Okay, so I will do that. So Lenny's primed the pump here for us. So this is the cultural profile that is in GlobeSmart. So those of you who have seen this before, you'll recognize this. Those of you who are immersed in the literature say, gee, that kind of looks like Hofstadter, or that kind of looks like a bit of Trompenauer's and some of the other sources out there. And those all went into our conceptual framework as we developed this. So what the cultural assessment that we did is that students completed the GlobeSmart cultural profile. So they would have individually determined where they were in terms of these 5 dimensions. And these are the 5 dimensions that our research tells us that probably have the biggest impacts in terms of the cultural dimensions you could look at, biggest impact in terms of the workplace, and biggest impact in the classroom as well. So they would go ahead and they would do the assessment, and they would see where they are on that scale. And once they are grounded in terms of where they are on the scale, and they have an awareness of what their cultural orientations are, then they have a base point where they can go and they can compare their orientation to their colleagues. And of course, what they would have also done is be able to compare their own orientation, their own dimension to what the norms would be. And then, always got to be careful when you talk about describing the United States as, we know that everyone's not the same, but we do have a profile, at least, that they can compare themselves to in terms of how their orientation actually compares to the typical U.S. profile. So there was the cultural assessment. Again, that's neutral. So look at the bottom of this one here. We're on the country page for the United States. So when Tara conducted this class, we didn't just use the GlobeSmart for the profile. There were actually a whole bunch of activities that they did on GlobeSmart. So one of the things they would have done, if you look down on the bottom right-hand side there, this is a hypothetical person. And the hypothetical person is compared as the one that's in black compared to the US, so they can compare themselves to the US profile. And then also notice there was a whole bunch of other things that would be available to them on the country level. So they would get briefings in the culture and customs of the US, names and phrases, key business skills in the US. They have various multimedia sources they can go to. They can test their knowledge on the US. And this particular study focused on preparing people in the US. So within GlobeSmart, we actually have in-depth briefings on 97 different countries, of which the US is one. And all of you who are on this webinar will give you guest access to GlobeSmart if you want to take a deeper dive on this after the webinar. The program, the intervention, included a series of learning paths. So GlobeSmart They would have completed a learning path. This happens to be the learning path in terms of an introduction to the United States. So this would have had very clearly defined steps. One of the things that people like about this is once they complete the step on the platform, they can go ahead and print out a certificate to show that they completed it. So this would have been just the one on terms of introduction to the United States. There was also, they did one on cultural foundations. They did one on leveraging diverse styles. They did one on pairing. So there were actually 4 different learning paths that they would have gone through. So that was how GlobeSmart was used. Then we had the intercultural effectiveness scale. So it's the IES. So what the IES does, and we did this before they did the learning intervention, the pre-departure, and afterwards. So we actually assessed on that scale, and they used a Likert scale of 1 to 7, and they were either low, medium, or high, and they would have gotten, when they completed this, they would have gotten a personalized report that not only gave them where they were on that scale, but would have also included specific recommendations of how they could improve their overall intercultural competency. And the 3 within, so they got an overall intercultural competency score, and they also got scores for their continuous learning, their ability to learn and understand, their interpersonal engagement, their ability to develop and manage relationships effectively with people from cultures who are different. And probably one that those of us who've played in this international arena for a while, I personally think is probably the most important, our hardiness, the ability to kind of recover from stressful situations and so forth. So those were the instruments that we used. And at this point, let me turn it back to Tara and talk about the other things that we used. So it wasn't just those assessments, there were other sources of data. Back to you, Tara.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, there was a lot of data collected from the first workshop, the 4-week online class, the second concluding workshop, and then there was also data collected from ongoing emails and Skype meeting correspondences, and finally 3 post-arrival online surveys that we collected during the participants' first 3 months of the fall semester. We even collected artifacts to include in the analysis of the overall class's impact, and some of those artifacts would include we had networking introductions. The U.S. professor would often know people, colleagues or peers or just friends, that potential friends of these Polish Fulbright scholars in the area or at the university that they were headed to. And so those introductions went a long way for the post-arrival integration and networking. Other artifacts were included like letters of recommendation or LinkedIn recommendations that were developed from the relationship between the professor and the participant during the pre-departure course. The course evaluations that were collected from participants, the self-assessments, written reflections throughout the class, the teacher observations or the teacher's notes, the group discussion, kind of feedback and notes during the workshops, and then the quizzes were also looked at. So there was a lot of complementing information and material that we were able to kind of triangulate the influences and impact of the pre-departure intervention with what the students thought was beneficial, what they gained, what they applied to their post-arrival experience. The control group and the treatment group both participated in those post-arrival surveys. So we were able to take the student narrative from their own stories and kind of look at relationships between their post-arrival experiences and how preparation either supported the post-arrival or maybe set them up for unfavorable experiences during post-arrival. And that was probably some of the best feedback from the sources of data that we received. So some of the findings, moving on to the findings here, the treatment group, well, they took the IES, as Dan said, at the beginning and then at the end of the cultural and academic preparation class during the pre-departure stage. Not all of the participants, or I'm sorry, not only did all of the participants' IES reports demonstrate increases in their abilities, but the students' evaluations and their written reflections and their worksheets, their quizzes, everything also indicated that they had gained new skills, cultural knowledge, and self-confidence to interact and communicate with U.S. natives and to perform better and be more productive at their new U.S. assignment. Down here in the second section, you can see what students reported within their course evaluations, within their self-assessments at the end of the class, and within the post-arrival surveys, that they had increased skills with language and communication, U.S. networking norms and practices, as I already mentioned, that confidence and the willingness to get out of their comfort zone, to build new relationships, to try new things, to travel, to integrate. They had more professional and academic readiness skills, which translated in them being more effective and efficient at their work or their academic responsibilities in the U.S. Here's some quotes to demonstrate the treatment group's experiences. Do this here. And I want to highlight a couple here. This first one, I really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the U.S. culture from the program. It really helped me in my first week. One reoccurring theme that we saw in the data was the students recognizing the opportunity to practice English or discuss culture while practicing English with the U.S. professor, about the opportunity to learn the insider's perspective and cultural experience, the legal system, because without it, they would not have had the opportunity. So that word opportunity kept coming up over and over and over again. We saw a theme of decreasing anxiety, not just for the participant, but for their family members if they were bringing their spouse or their children with them to the U.S. So this class didn't just impact the participant, but it impacted their whole nuclear family unit. It gave confidence and reassurance that they were supported and equipped to handle the international relocation and integration experience. I'm going to go on here. You guys can read those. So findings from the data collected from the control group, these are some of the themes that we saw throughout the data, but these participants had more often expressed a need or a wish for additional training. And although the themes and expressions shared were covering several different preparation topics, the three or four that we saw within the data that most frequently appeared was about U.S. culture, about the U.S. law, or in this situation, U.S. law, transportation, and lifestyle, kind of logistics and norms. Throughout the control group, during their post-arrival surveys, we often saw more difficulties and conflicts or misunderstandings between them and people in the United States, either student peers, faculty, or colleagues. Also neighbors and people at large in the community. A lot more of those discouraging and frustrating conflict experiences were shared, and a lot of them led to feelings of being unsafe or sick. We found that control group participants shared more often that they were ill or didn't feel good. You know, and this all kind of transfers into their ability. If they don't feel good, they're not going to go to school, they're not going to be working optimally and be able to maximize their experience in the US. So these are all kind of challenges we saw throughout their findings.
Tara, can I pick up on something, a question I'd like to ask here? That last bullet point about how the friends, indicating their friends were their main support and of source of support and information. Can you comment a little bit in terms of that, how that in itself can become a challenge in terms of their adjustment, their over-reliance?
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. What we found is that a couple different things related to relying on friends for support and information. Oftentimes, friends are not equipped with all the information or most accurate or updated information. So these participants often would be given advice that was not to their benefit. It was maybe misleading or incomplete, compared to the participants having a reliable source and from their university or from someone who has updated material to answer their questions accurately. Also, what we found on this note from the control group's findings was that this group who didn't have the preparation, well, they expressed retreating into friend circles and networks that were primarily from their home country because they felt scared or anxious or frustrated or maybe even a little offended by other U.S. people. And so they isolated themselves to their home country networks in the U.S. So they'd find a community of other Polish people. And in the control group findings, they expressed that this was counterproductive to their goals because they wanted to come here to the U.S., learn English, develop their language skills, learn about U.S. culture, really advance their academic or professional career by networking and getting more experience. But what happened was, because they were afraid or unsure or they lacked the cultural competencies to integrate and to make those new relationships, they fell backwards. And in their own words, they felt isolated and confined to their home country peers. And so that was very frustrating for most of the participants. And this situation is very common at U.S. universities and in study abroad organizations, where students end up only hanging out with their home country peers, and it holds them back academically and professionally.
Yeah, kudos to them in terms of their level of self-awareness, indicating that how that they're doing that. It sounds like, in their own words, it undermines their goal of immersing themselves in U.S. culture. So. Great. Oh, good. Okay, so let's pull up our last polling question, and we'll also have some time for Q&A after this as well. So, reflecting now on what's been presented, reflecting on your own experience, because a lot of you, it was 46% of you, did pre-departure cultural training. Based on what you heard today, based on your own experience, based on your knowledge of the literature, what do you think is the most important? Should it focus on academic differences and similarities between the home and the host nation, in this case being Poland and the US, similarities, with regard to the culture, setting the goals and action plans, verbal, nonverbal communication. And if it's something else, which it can be, let us know, and we'll ask Nicole, be on the lookout for that. So give you a moment. And if you've already voted and we're waiting for the results to come up, please type in a chat question. We'd like to get a little bit more interaction before we get to the finding sheets.
Dan, this is Nicole. We've received a lot of great questions from the audience, so thank you. A quick one I think Tara can address from Tula, which is, were these students living together or placed in American homes during their studies in the U.S.?
And Tula, that's a great question. The participants were living independently on their own in the U.S., apartments, condos, house rentals. They were attending or living in 11 different university communities in the United States. So they kind of went their own way when they got here.
Perfect, thank you. And we have the results up.
Yep, let's try to make sense out of this. So cultural differences, similarities between home and host, that with creating goals and action plans seem to be our winners. The verbal and nonverbal communication skills seems to be an outlier. Anything really insightful on the something else, even though it's only 3%? I wonder if there's a diamond in the rough there.
We didn't get any other responses, Dan, but I have plenty more questions to bring in when we can. Do you want to move into the Q&A slide? And oh no, you still have conclusions.
Hold on, yeah, we'll take another. Go back a second. So, any other questions that would have come in? We can get rid of this. Take down the poll. We'll get into the findings in a moment. Any other questions that would have come in, Nicole? We got a minute or two.
I'm sorry, I was speaking on mute to myself. We got a great question from Lenny asking if there is any post-test data for the control group that you could share.
Hey, Lenny, thank you for the question. The data that we collected from the control group was just the post that we actually analyzed and used within this relationship was the post-arrival survey, so self-conducted surveys on the reflection questions of relationships between pre-departure preparation and post-arrival experiences. So there was the treatment group received the IES before and after the intervention, but the control group did not get the intervention. So we did a series of just questions and survey questions for them.
Thank you. And another question from Lauren asking are all of these tools free to use, or did you have to pay for both services, for the GlobeSmart profile and the intercultural effectiveness scale?
We collaborated with Tara. This is Dan speaking from Aperian Global. We collaborated with Tara on those, in the study. These tools are available, and anyone who's interested in terms of, you will get after the webinar, you'll get free guest access to it onto the GlobeSmart, and also you'll get a sample IES report. They are available. There are costs associated with them. Please follow up with me afterwards, and I'll be happy to share with you the various licensing and fee schedule associated with these things.
And I would just add on to that, when designing a university course, there are a number of components and elements that require operational expenditures to make sure that the quality and the instruction is of accurate and effective impact. And so if anyone has any questions about all the elements and components that we've added into the course, feel free to email me, Madden-Dent@sierranevada.edu, and I can share about those a little bit more.
But Yeah, and there are several other, a lot of universities using this now in terms of, it's interesting, I'm teaching at St. Joseph's College this semester in addition to the relationship I have with Stony Brook, and their cost associated with these things when compared to the to the cost of a textbook and so forth is really very, very, very small. So good. Okay, let's move on now. We'll have time for more questions, but Tara, let's move on. In fact, I'll advance here for you to the conclusions and recommendations. Waiting for that slide to advance. Back to you, Tara.
Thank you, Dan. So for the conclusions and recommendations, both my research in this study and previous studies and the literature suggest that pre-departure preparation is associated with increased academic achievement, increased health and safety, increased student retention and graduation rates, and increased professional readiness. Having prepared students to perform and actually matriculate translates into not just student success, but also institutional success. Moreover, students and their parents who now have more schooling options than ever before are selecting institutions and organizations that provide 360-degree support from pre-departure through their study and the return home or repatriation stages. That being said, the findings of this study, like in the literature, that echo in the literature, recommend that university and educational leaders add a pre-departure class into their international or study abroad program. Furthermore, the recommendation of how that is done is multifaceted because it makes a big difference in how your organization offers that pre-departure. Some offer it in orientations, online pre-departure orientations. Some have a non-credit online option that's either mandatory or recommended. The research demonstrates that some of the best practices for effective pre-departure preparation to have most impact and benefits during the post-arrival is to make it a full class, to either be standalone or to complement a study abroad program throughout a first semester experience, and to make the class mandatory. These are students who we're talking about, and if you give an 18-year-old, specifically we're looking at undergraduate, an option to study, it's going to be not as a full commitment and investment on their part as if a university says, no, we know this is important and we require you to take this class. And furthermore, if you do require or make a class mandatory, that you reward the student with the academic credit that they deserve for putting in the time and the energy and effort to study these important global leadership skills necessary for successful students and at large for successful workers in our global economy. We recommend that the class not just be content, but it be inclusive of measurement, assessments, and instruments so that the students can identify their own cultural preferences to increase self-awareness, self-management skills, and also to assess cultural competencies and to compare those with the home and host cultures, therefore to increase the social awareness and management skills so that they have more responsible decision-making abilities to culture shift and to integrate in the host culture. And lastly, include a lot of reflection and opportunity for feedback. This allows for student growth, also for program development to see where your pre-departure class can improve or pivot depending on the needs of your students and your campus goal or organization goals.
That's great. Thank you, Tara. So we do have some time now I've got a few more minutes to take some more questions. So if you've already put in a question, hopefully it'll be one that Nicole has selected. If not, now you have an opportunity to type one in. And so Nicole, do we have any that you'd like us, good one for us to address?
Sure. And if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, before we jump into the questions, I'd like to share what we'll be sending you after today's webinar. We'll be sharing with you, of course, the slides and recording from today. We'll also be sharing with you the white paper that Tara and Dan co-authored that we've been covering. And in addition to that, we'll share with you a free trial access to GlobeSmart and a sample IES report. So that's coming soon, and we have several questions. The first one I'd like to address is from Charis, asking if it's common that parents join the pre-departure classes with their students, and how difficult is it to make this mandatory?
Sorry for that question. Parent involvement and engagement, or parent and family even, is something that I highly recommend if possible. In this study, the only family engagement incorporated were the dependents who were traveling with the participants from Poland to the US. There were even specific Skype sessions that were conducted with the US professor and the spouse to help address concerns for life management, integration, everything from transportation to housing, banking, shopping, lodging, kind of rental conditions. We, in the class, really looked at the nuances and the unknown experiences these students were going to face, and made sure to offer instruction and support in the class to the nuclear family joining the participant to the US. But if your programs can add a specific section for parent or family engagement, I would not only recommend it, but would love to help in any way, because that sounds very exciting. And we know that they have a direct influence on the student experience during the study abroad or international program. And Nicole, what was the second part of that question?
Good question. I erased it from my screen, but I think it was, yeah, apologies. I don't recall the second part.
I think it has something to do with the class design and operational processes. Again, my university has two different classes. One for US students to prepare for outbound study abroad, and then one class specifically designed for international students who are preparing for their US experience. If anyone attending today would like to look over the syllabus or want to learn more about the class, I'm happy to share my university's courses. Just send me an email, we'll set up a Skype time.
Yeah, it was actually, how difficult is it to make the course mandatory?
Oh, yes, that's right, mandatory. So it depends on the institution. If it's a private or public university, if it's a study abroad organization, it really just depends on their policies. But for me and the institutions who I've worked with in developing some of their pre-departure programming, it takes a long time. It can take a long time. It takes a lot of effort to go through accreditation and making sure you have qualified professors and all the capacity for the online management system to make that mandatory. But I do know that universities are increasingly making it required. And if a student does not complete a pre-departure orientation or their class, they're ineligible to go abroad. And again, this is not just for the student benefit, but the course also serves as risk and liability management for the institution, making sure that they are doing everything in their power to protect and prepare the students for what could be a dangerous experience if they are unprepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. With 1 minute left, I'd like to ask one last question, which I'm sure is on the minds of many, which is from Sarah asking, what can a school do to address these challenges if they have a small school budget and limited staff?
I would say collaboration. Our schools collaborate with other universities. I know Aperian Global is very flexible, and they are welcome to the discussions. Just contact us and we can move forward with those discussions. But I also come from a university with a limited budget. We've had to get very creative with our resources. So any sort of collaboration opportunity is much welcomed.
And we work with schools of a broad variety of various universities. So we have lots of experience in terms of broad applications that affect everybody, also just using an individual classes as well. Actually, one of our webinars back in April featured the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University and also the Keenan Flagler Business School at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where they actually presented in a format very similar to this, the ways that they were using GlobeSmart in the program. But just to reinforce what Tara had indicated there, we've got lots of all applications of all sizes with regard to both the GlobeSmart and the IES. So just, I think our last slide is our contact information. So let's move to that. Just follow up with us after the webinar. So I think, Nicole, back to you. I think we're right on time.
Yes, thank you all very much for joining. We'll be sharing this contact information along with the resources we discussed in our follow-up communication, and appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.